So for like 2 months before my first contest.
What'd you take?
Little bit of
What's up, guys? Derek, moreplates.com. Today we're going to be talking about Dorian Yates' very first steroid cycle. From a very early age, it was pretty obvious that Dorian Yates was different from the rest and had a hyper response to training and anabolics. And a lot of people look to Dorian as the pinnacle example of hard work beats talent, and genetics aren't everything, and if you just grind hard in the gym then you can overcome lackluster genetics. And the reality is Dorian actually has some of the most insane bodybuilding genetics of all time. He just had maybe like one notable legging body part in his biceps, and that's pretty much it. I don't know why he's seen as somebody who genetically wasn't gifted. If you look at him before he started training compared to after 9 months of training, this guy already has surpassed what 99% of people in the gym look like after a decade. Like, this is not poor genetics, and this is naturally. I see guys on gear constantly who look worse than this that have been cranking for years, to be honest. When you look back at his first contest ever, Dorian talks about how after only 6 months of training at 21 years old, went and did an event at a Temple Hotel across the street from the gym that he worked out at. And if you actually go look at some of the articles on that contest, you can see some pictures of him. And this is him in that competition at the Temple Hotel, Birmingham, in 1984. So here he is at 21 years old after 6 months of natural training. So he's gone from, as a teenager or however old he is here with no training, to looking like this after 6 months of natural training. So clearly this is like the equivalent of guys who've been blasting and cruising for 5 to 10 years that I see locally competing at regional level shows. Like, this is not, and even that, this is still like superior to many of them. Like, this is the pinnacle of bodybuilding genetics at its finest right here. And moving forward to Dorian 9 months after training, like, again, this is not something that can be attributed solely to hard work beats talent. It's definitely not the case whatsoever. And you look at him in the first photographs taken in 1984 in Temple Gym, and he's not the most jacked guy in these images here, but definitely at least looks like he works out. And this is, before getting heavily into bodybuilding, before taking anabolics, before anything substantial. And he already has a better body composition than the majority of guys at your gym that take gear, to be honest. Like, this is not a lack of good genetics. This is the pinnacle of genetics with concurrent hard work. So moving forward to 1985, we look at Dorian's first bodybuilding contest where he was actually enhanced, and this is what he looks like at that first show. So here at the Novice West Coast, England, where he placed first, and shortly thereafter he went to the World Games in London and placed 7th. And this is after his first cycle, so he's obviously gaining at a substantial rate. This is only after 18 months of beginning training. He already looks like a bodybuilder, and he's packed on probably, who knows, 40, 50 pounds of muscle already. And what he used was literally nothing relative to what most guys are using to prepare for these shows, and relative to what a, standard newbie first cycle is.
20 milligrams of D-ball a day. That was the first thing I ever had. And then nearer to the contest, I switched to some Anavar and Primobolan.
And Dorian actually elaborated on this cycle a bit further in an interview he did with Muscular Development, where he said, "It was 1985, I was 23 years old and decided to enter my first competition after a year and a half of training, in which I had made excellent progress. I knew the others who would be competing would be using gear, and I wanted to even the playing field. It was a very deliberate decision that I didn't take lightly, as I did as much reading as I could first. At 23, I felt I was old enough. At that age, you are fully matured physically, you've reached your full adult height, and so on. Even though I hadn't been training terribly long, I had already managed to develop my physique to a decent level, which we can obviously verify he had. Looking back, I may have been able to win that contest without using anything. I did one 6-week building cycle of 20 milligrams of Dianabol a day, which took me from 215 at 5'11 to 235. Those were the most dramatic results I ever saw from steroids. I took 6 weeks off the gear. Then at 8 weeks out from my contest, I began using 15 milligrams of Anavar per day, as well as 1 shot of Primobolan a week, which was 200 milligrams. I competed at around 210 to 215 and won that contest. EFBB, which is Britain's equivalent of the NPC, officials were there and convinced me to represent the United Kingdom the following weekend as our heavyweight at the IFBB World Games. I placed 7th and competed with men like Barry DeMay and Matt Mendenhall, both of whom were top amateur heavyweights in their respective nations at that time. So at that show, we see Dorian displaying an insane level of progression relative to what he looked like in the Temple Gym photo shoot, shortly before that, and significantly different than he was prior to training. Like, this guy's made like 3 lifetimes worth of gains in like 18 months, and a significant chunk of those being completely natural. Like, this guy's made the large majority of his progress. Obviously, he exploded when he started the gear, but the difference between him natural and just his first 9 months of training as a natural is just insane and cannot be attributed to just hard work. And now enhanced only 1 year later at the EFBB British Championship, Dorian ended up placing first and taking the title in London, displaying significantly more muscularity than in his, just making an insane amount of progress show to show and showing the true meaning of hyper response. Like, this is bodybuilding genetics at its finest, regardless of whatever argument you can make in terms of lackluster genetics in his bicep shape or anything like that. It's one body part, and the rest of its progress is just phenomenal. You can't argue with this guy's response to gear and training in general. Like, there's a reason he became Mr. Olympia in the first place, and anyone who wants to argue his training intensity and workout split and training past failure is the reason he made such ridiculous progress, that's just not the case at all. This guy made stupid amount of progress even as a natural, and then moving forward when he became enhanced on very, very what would be considered baby doses. This guy gained, upwards of what looks to be 20 pounds of stage weight like per year consistently until he won the Olympia. Like, this guy just, exploded, and you can't argue with the genetic response there, and you can't try and attribute that to just this guy trained harder than everyone else. This is his first cycle, very, very small dosages compared to what most people think Olympians are taking, and this is just a true display of what genetics are capable of in the genetic elite. So that's all for today. Thank you guys for watching. Hopefully you found that interesting. Please like, subscribe, check out my blog, moreplatesmoredates.com. Follow me on Instagram at moreplates_moredates, Facebook, Snapchat, Twitter, etc. Check out the podcast, link in the description below. Talk to you guys soon.